Hello and welcome to Growsthalam, an online learning center. I'm Uttam Pal along with the chapter 3 recommended lab equipments for Cisco CCNA. If you're thinking about learning Cisco networking, you will need to get practice on Cisco routers and switches. To practice, most of us build a home lab that we can use to practice everything. If you are interested in becoming CCNA certified, you probably have no idea what equipments you should buy to study. So, in this lesson, I want to help you by explaining what equipments you should buy and what you should avoid. So, what equipments should you get? To practice everything in CCNA routing and switching, you will need some routers and switches. You can buy real hardwares or you can use an emulator or simulators if you don't buy the real hardwares. I will explain the advantages and disadvantages of each. In real hardwares, if you are new to networking or Cisco and never worked with their routers, switches before, if you, it's not a basically bad idea to buy some real hardwares. You will get feeling of what is like to work in with the real routers and switches, cable, everything, etc. First of all, we talk about the switches. Cisco Catalyst 2950T. This is the first one. The first picture is Cisco Catalyst 2950T. This is a layer 2 switch that does pretty much everything you need for CCNA routing and switching. If you look at eBay, you can find the Cisco Catalyst 2950 around $30. It doesn't matter if you buy 8, 24 or 48 port model. Not too bad, right? Keep in mind, you can sell them once you are done with CCNA without losing much money. This switch is cheap and perfect for CCNA. The Catalyst 2950 is the great switch, but it doesn't support any layer 3 feature, which needs this if you want to use for your switch as a router. This image is for the Cisco Catalyst 3550. Cisco Catalyst 3550 does everything the 2950 can do, but it also supports routing as well as. You will need at least one of these switches. What about other switches model? Anything else we can use for the CCNA? First one is Cisco Catalyst 2960 is the successor of Cisco Catalyst 2950. It's a great layer 2 switch but bit pricier. Number two, the Cisco Catalyst 3560 is the successor of Cisco Catalyst 3550. It also offers routing features but also much pricier. Third one, Cisco Catalyst 3750 is also a switch that can do routing, it but it's very expensive. Now there are any switches that you should not to buy. Number one, don't buy the Cisco Catalyst 2900 XL switch. You will need at least the Cisco Catalyst 2950 switch. Many features are not supported on the Cisco Catalyst 2900 XL switch. Number two, don't buy Cisco Catalyst 3500 XL switch. Same problem as the Cisco Catalyst 2900 XL. Now, talk about the routers. There are two routers that I can recommend. These routers are end of sales and very affordable nowadays. This image is for the Cisco 18,000 series routers. 18,000 series a small router that supports everything you want to try for CCNA routing and switching labs. There are four different models: 1811, 1822, 1841, 1861. My recommendation is to buy the router 1841 router. This router has two fast Ethernet interfaces and two slot modules known as WICs that you can use to insert a variety of interfaces, including serial interfaces. 1861 router has one slot module and is pricier than the 1841 router. 1811 and 1822 only have two fast Ethernet interfaces. If you can get them cheap, there are nice to have. These are nice to have basically. But keep in mind, if you can't play with things like serial interfaces that are required to test some WAN protocols or connect analog phones to your router when you want to play with voice over IP. The, this picture below Cisco 1800 series are Cisco 200 series routers. 200 series is another great router. One of the advantages over the 1800 series is its rack model. If you plan to buy a smaller server rack, then you can easily mount these routers. And one disadvantage for this router is noisy. It produces far more noise than the 1800 series. So if you plan to buy these routers and sit next to them, I would look for the 1841 router instead. There are different models. There's 2801, 2811, 2821, and 2851. All of these router models are suitable for CCNA routing and switching. These are the basic differences between 1800 series and 2800 series routers. In the these are the different models: 1811, 1822, 1841, 1861, and 200 series 2801, 2811, 2821, and 2851. Now we talk about the flash memories and RAM. What are they? Basically, routers come with a flash memory and RAMs. The flash memory is used to store the operating system, which is also known as Cisco IOS. The RAM is required to run Cisco IOS and it processes. The latest Cisco IOS images required that you have at in 1800 series router at least 64 MB flash memory and 192 MB of RAM, random access memory. In 2800 series, you have to at least 128 MB flash memory along with 512 MB of RAM. These are the minimum requirements for the latest iOS images required by the Cisco. Now talk about the some cables. These are the Cisco console cables, UTP cables. It's nice to have routers and switches, but you also need to connect them to each other or your computer somehow. There are the cables that you should buy. This cable in blue, this is known as Cisco console cable. It probably comes with the switch or router, but make sure you have at least one. You will need to configure your devices. Most computer laptops don't have serial ports anymore, and you might have to get one of these. This is a USB based console cable. Now This is also a USB to serial port converter. If you have one of those, then you might have to switch the console cable between your switches. It works, but you can also buy something like this. USB connector with 4 into RS-232 serial connector. This one you can use for your blue Cisco console cable to connect your network devices. It saves the hassle of plugging and unplugging or use your console cable between your switches. This is the UTP cable between the switches and routers. You will require UTP cables. There is difference between straight through and crossover cables. Modern switches and networks cards support auto sensing, so it really doesn't matter what kind of cable you use. If you are going to connect your 2950 or 3550 switches to each other, make sure you buy crossover cables since they don't support auto sensing. What is auto sensing? Auto sensing means that the interface will figure out automatically if you connected a straight or crossover USB cable. Apart from that, there are some WAN protocols that you will have to practice. These require serial interfaces and serial cables. It depends on your router model, which interface and cables you will need. The picture below is a DB60 serial cable that can be used with WIC1/T serial interface. I recommend to get two serial cables for your lab. Now, we are talking about some emulator and simulator which easily available in the market. Another option to get familiar with Cisco routers and switches to use an emulator or simulator. These allows you to run Cisco IOs on your own computer or mimic the CLI. There are number of different options we have. First of all, there is a popular emulator known as GNS3 that runs the Cisco IO software, but you can only emulate routers, no switches. You can download GNS3 for free from, but you will have to supply the iOS images yourself. Cisco owns the copyright on iOS, so you can't be shared freely. I suggest using the 3640 or 3725 routers in GNS3. The closest you can get emulate a switch in GNS3 is inserting the NM16 ESW Ether switch module in your virtual router. It added 16 switch ports to your virtual router and supports basic switching features. Unfortunately, this model is very limited and I don't recommend using it for CCNA. It is possible through the connect real switches to your virtuous GNS3 routers if you have enough network cards in your computer. You can also add some USB network adapters to achieve this. Now we talk about the Cisco Viral. This is Cisco's official emulator and it is a great product and it's what I use for the most of my labs nowadays. The advantages of Cisco Virals are it's from Cisco, so it's 100% legal. It's include all iOS images for routers and switches. It runs routers, switches, but also some other devices like Cisco ASA firewall. It does have some disadvantages as well as what they are. Number one, have this hardware requirement at least 8 GB of RAM and a decent CPU processor. It's not free. You have to pay about $199 annually. Third, it runs on VMware, so you will need an ESXi server or VMware workstation. ESXi can be downloaded for free, but VMware workstation is a paid product. Fourth one, the installation is not straightforward. It does take time to install Cisco Virtual and to get familiar with it. The third one is the packet tracer. Cisco also has a simulator called packet tracer, specifically created for CCNA routing and switching. It's a simulator, so it mimics the commands and output of the Cisco IOS. Everything that is Cisco related, CCNA related, supported, but if you want to try something else, it's possible that the command is not included. Packet trace is basically not available for the public. It can only be downloaded if you are a member of Cisco Networking about Academy. So these are the emulator and simulator which can use instead of real hardwares. But personally, I recommend Cisco Viral because it has all Cisco IOS images. It runs routers and switches both along with the Cisco ASA firewall. Okay. Now we talk about topologies. What kind of topologies we used for the CCNA labs? No matter if you buy real routers and switches or use an emulator like Cisco Viral, you will have to build topology first. For CCNA routing and switching, I recommend to connect your switches like this. Hmm? Three switches in a triangle allows you to play with all switching protocols without having to recable your network over and over again. If you have real routers, I would connect the routers like this. This is the topology 2. This topology allows to practice with the routers without having recabling. In this topology, you can run all protocols that you use on routers and switches. This topology works in real hardware basically. Or you can use this topology on Cisco Viral as well as. The topology above can be used to practice most of protocols that we use on the routers. I also recommend to connect two serial cables between two routers like this below as well as. This allows you to practice all WAN protocols that you will encounter in CCNA routing and switching. Okay, the interfaces number that I am using, the diagram above might be different for you. Each switch router uses different interfaces and numbers, so don't bother about these interfaces numbers or. So I hope in this lesson you help to understand the different options that we have to build a CCNA routing and switching lab. If you are new to Cisco networking, then I would highly recommend it to build a lab with real hardwares. You want to get familiar not only with the Cisco CLI but also with the hardware as well as. If you are on a budget, then packet if you are sorry if you are on a budget, then packet tracer is the good option since it allows you practice most CCNA commands. You still want to use some hardware. You can try GNS3 to emulate your routers and connect them to real switches. It might take some time to get it to work through. Time that is better spent actually studying networking instead of fiddling with an emulator. But Cisco Viril is the great product, and I recommend for the Cisco Viril instead of GNS3 and Packet Tracer. That's all for now. For more information, please visit www.gurusalam.com. Thank you.